ES Audio.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Well, hello and welcome to the pod. I'm delighted that we've got a full house this week with the team all back together. First up, all the way from South Wales, it's Sarra Elgan.
All the way from South Wales? You make it sound like I live in Australia and I've taken a...
Well, you have had a few holidays this summer, Sarah, so
I have
it's
had a few
lovely to
holidays.
see you. How
Nice
are you?
to see- Yeah, I'm good, thanks. This is very nice, isn't it? What was it called? A podcasting studio?
Well,
I've not been in one before.
We've got someone who has their own podcast and...
I'm trying to impress.
He is royalty these days, so we've pushed the boat out and the budget out a little bit.
Shall we introduce him then, given we've spoken about him? Actual royalty, not just rugby royalty, Mike Tindall. How are you, Mike?
I'm very well. Yeah, it's very, very, it's as if I was a cat, I'm clinging on to that very tenuous link to your family. But this used to also be our podcast studio.
I mean, you struggle to get Haskell through the door, wouldn't you? You'd have to turn
What,
sideways.
his head or his...
Well, you're very welcome, Mike. We've also got Steve Cording here from the Evening Standard. You right, Steve?
Hi, Sarah. I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, just like to say thank you to VoxPod for hosting us today. This is great to all be back together, isn't it?
It is all together. It's nice actually because nobody's shouting at me now for not plugging my earphones in properly or for not getting on camera properly. So this is nice. I like it. A little later, we'll also be joining the Evening Standard's rugby correspondent, Nick Purewal, as we link up with him in France to get all the latest news from the England camp. Okay, so let's find out what you've been up to then this summer, Lol. What have you been doing?
Not as much as I thought I would be in terms of holidays, because all my children are sort of grown up and they're all working full time. So unless it's Verbier or Ibiza, they're not really interested in coming away. They're not really interested in coming away.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree then, though, does it?
It's been an interesting summer, but all good. Very exciting.
How's Enzo's job going?
Yeah, it's going very well, and he's just left Bristol University, got a 2-1. So I don't know, you probably got some exam results as well. Feeling quite proud parents, really.
Yeah, we are.
My son is obviously somehow ended up quite bright, intelligent, conscientious, good looking. To which you say you must have picked up the wrong children, at hospital, I guess. But no, it's been good fun this summer.
No, we've done good. And you've been shamelessly plugging in your book.
I have, The Boys of Winter, which
I've brought in a copy. Just
Mike made a contribution to.
And it's got lots of sticky labels on it.
Yeah, he's ready.
Yes, I've got little bits to raise with you, Mr. Tindall. Yes.
Well, it's a quick look down memory lane, a bit of nostalgia from when England were a little bit better at rugby than they are now, let's just say. And look, it's 20-year anniversary. It makes us all feel very old. And I just wanted to... There's been a lot said, written and done since 2003, but I don't think we've really heard from the players. You hear after dinner stories, don't you? And they get slightly embellished, or
you forget what the actual truth is.
Yeah, so I think what this is 31 different versions of what happened in Sydney, and more importantly, or more interestingly, was it a good thing that we won? You'd like to think it was. And how did it change your life? So available in all good bookshops.
It changed your life. Properly changed your life.
Well, not actually. I'm not sure actually winning it did. Going to the tournament did, but then
okay.
also getting dropped from the semi-final was probably the more important
Because that's
thing.
when you met Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that is is that story in your book? Obviously.
It is.
I'd have to say that's worth being dropped for, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, isn't it just?
It worked out nicely.
Thank you, Clive.
Yeah.
Had you actually had a skinful when you met her? Because you went out to drown your sorrows.
No.
For being
So
dropped.
I didn't really talk to her that much. In that it was the Manly Wharf bar is now very famous in our relationship because that's the bar that we went to. But she'd been out on a long lunch with some of her girlfriends. And anyone who knows Zara, a long lunch is a good long lunch. But because I went out with Cozza who had been dropped off the squad, and then Austin, who'd flown in for the potential that Dawson, Kieran was carrying injuries. So I was pretty miserable. I was still quite young. I was only just turned 25. I was quite down in the dumps. So I didn't really actually chat that much to her that night. But then I got past her number later because, as I just said, she likes to go out. So she wanted to know.
I got past her number.
So then after the final, she wanted to know where we were all going. She wanted to see Lowell playing bongos at the Cargo Club.
She's obviously looking for a very tall, attractive, bald-looking fella. So
she bypassed you.
She must have looked straight over me and saw who did.
I have to ask, what's your opening line to a member of the royal family?
I don't think I've got a clue, but you have to. This is what I always try and explain. It wasn't that weird because Harry and William were such big fans. Obviously, the Princess Royal did everything she did for Scottish rugby, but then off the back of meeting William and Harry, then Eugenie and Beatrice would come along. So you sort of had met quite a lot of them along the way. And Zara had been out all the time. Pete went to university with Beastie, who's one of my best mates. So there was it wasn't that strange. It's not like meeting the Queen where it's a completely different story. But it was, so it was quite comfortable, really.
It's a hell of a rugby WhatsApp group as well, isn't it, that?
Yeah.
Like with the rugby group, not just a royal one, there's a rugby one.
I was going to say, we'll talk about, presumably everyone has their, like you said, Kate is now with the RFU as the patron, and obviously William with Wales, Princess Royal with Scotland. So there's going to be definitely some loyalties divided.
Without doubt. I mean, it's a funny one because the Princess Royal has been patron of Scottish rugby for, 40 years or whatever, and is a massive Scotland fan, will go to the nth degree to get to every game. And then she follows Gloucester Rugby and she's up to date and she knows what she's talking about as well. So it's always quite funny having those conversations with her. It's even better if you're England captain, you win a Calcutta Cup match and you get the trophy off her.
That's extra special. Okay, let's move on then from that. Well, I haven't asked you what you've done this summer. Have you done anything interesting?
Well, he's been. Lawrence has spoken about it so much that I actually went to Italy on holiday, which was
That's nice.
Amazing. I definitely would.
Thought you were dressing a bit better now.
Go back about it. Yeah, so it was a lovely little place on the border between Umbria and Tuscany. The scenery there was absolutely fantastic. So I could see why you go there a lot. It's beautiful.
You got real tan as well.
Yeah, I think so. Topped up in the garden. Yes.
And so, a proud mother, exam results.
Yeah, Sophia, our daughter did well in her GCSEs, really well. So it's just a really nice summer, really. That's Everyone happy in the Easterby household at the moment. Okay, right. So it's finally here then. The 10th Rugby World Cup will be entertaining us for the next 7 weeks as we see 20 teams who battle across 48 games in a bid to lift the Webb Ellis Cup. To date, you guys know this, obviously, 4 countries have added their names to the trophy. New Zealand, South Africa, Australia twice, and England making history in 2003. You guys obviously have some memories, some good memories. We've spoken about one of Mike's best memories from doing that. What's the period like for the players when you're kind of counting down the days until the tournament gets started? What would all these players be going through now? Give us an insight.
Well, different things for different players. I mean, England decided, rightly or wrongly, to announce their squad quite early. So I think everyone knew whether they were in or not. I mean, Wales, for instance, went through the warm-up games, no one quite knowing whether they're in the team. So in 2003, we were a very settled squad, but there were still some late changes. Mike Catt came into the squad quite late. I actually didn't play in the warm-up games because I conveniently tweaked my hamstring. I didn't even know I had a hamstring, actually. But apparently the boys were saying, well, Lawrence has got a golden ticket, he's on the plane already, sort of thing. But the hardest bit I found was when we arrived in the World Cup in Australia itself, because you're kind of there ready to go. There's still 3.5 weeks before the first game. I mean, that is a long time.
We did 18 days in Perth, didn't we?
Yeah. I guess you have to because of the jet lag. And I mean,
that's a long time.
France is very different. I just noticed on social media. Nice suits, by the way, for the England team. They've gone with the grey and the brown shoes. Is that
I really like them. I don't understand what someone...
Bringing back memories.
Bringing back some happy memories. But I don't know. I think it's different. I mean, the 2007 World Cup for me was very different because I was injured all the way through. And I was genuinely quite concerned. So it was definitely head down for me. So if you personally are in a good place, you're fit, you're raring to go, and the team are playing well, it's happy days.
But the difference is this time, this team is in a very different, this squad's in a very different position than what you guys were going out there.
Well, they're in a very different spot to what any England team has been. No, I think they're a team that's going with the lowest expectation of out of the 10 World Cups we've had.
You can dress it up.
That's a big statement.
You can dress it up differently, but the preparations could not have gone any worse, really. I mean, you can't tell me that losing 3 out of 4 warm-up games, arriving at a World Cup with your captain and talisman banned for 3 games, you're only number 8, also banned for 3 games, and you've lost Anthony Watson and Van Poortvliet. I mean, it's not really a lot more else that could have gone wrong. Now, we put that to one side now. I'm sure England fans will just say, right, let's just get behind the team. That first game is massive.
It's never good when you're selling it about stories where teams that have been expected to do nothing have gone on and done anything. That's what everyone's selling out there. 2011, France, disarray, sacked their coach, got to a final. Yeah. England 2007, weren't on form, 35-0 first game, got to a final. You're selling those stories rather than selling the other way. It's completely opposite for Ireland. Ireland is trying to get this chip off the shoulder. They're now going in number 1 and all the pressure's going to keep building on them.
Yeah, I do feel, though, that in previous World Cups, many of which Mike and I played in, there was a predictability about certain games and results because the gaps between the top teams and everyone else, the tier 2 nations, supposedly was a lot bigger. I think recent World Cups have shown that's different. I genuinely believe, and I know lots of people might agree or disagree, there could be one or two other upsets. I mean, England might not be the talking point soon because, what happens if Scotland suddenly produce a really amazing performance against South Africa?
I fancy them putting a performance in against South Africa.
Yeah. So I think there will be upsets in this tournament. It will be different from any other
Fiji,
World
the
Cup.
top-ranked team in Group C.
Yeah, geez, I'm really worried about Group C. I've got to be honest.
Well,
We're going to get there now.
Argentina and Japan.
Yeah.
Should we go through the pools then? Should we go through the pools? Let's do Pool A. So France, New Zealand, Italy, Uruguay, Namibia.
It's a boring pool, this one. There's one great game. It's the first game of the World Cup.
But do you know what, though? I was thinking about this the other day. I remember when the last World Cup was in France. And I know, New Zealand are a very different team than what Argentina was, and France are in a very different place now than what they were all those years ago. But Argentina beat France on that opening night. Do you remember? And it was all doom and gloom then from then on. So, I mean, if they lose that game, which they could, right? Does it just fall a bit flat?
It's an incredibly ballsy call, very French, to take that game on first. Because obviously you get to choose that first game if you're the host nation. Yeah, you get to pick who you play against. So this goes back to 2015 when England chose poorly. So they get to choose. Now, if they're hoping that they're hitting them off, they're going to catch them off colder. But then you look at France now with 4 injuries, Vilmzy, Bai, Ntamack, and maybe Dante might be out now, which is Dante's massive for them. I think Jalibert's still a quality player. So, but Dante's a massive miss if he misses it. So, it's very ballsy, very French. But if they pull it off and they win, obviously they beat them last time out, the country will go through the roof.
Yeah.
And
their preparation, I was reading, has been very, very different this time to 07. They've been very open. They've been letting fans in to train.
They look comfortable.
Seeing their families as well, which they didn't in 07.
They look so comfortable. I think what they managed to do in terms of taking that double World Cup winning under 20 side, basically, back-to-backs, to then grow them through this. People worry about, they've never been in this situation, never been under this pressure before. But they look so comfortable. I mean, they demolished Australia. Eddie still picks them to win, but the way that they've done it, the way they did it, what impressed me the most was building scores. They took shots at goal. They want to keep the scoreboard ticking over. A French team that thinks logically as well as be playing in a possible chaos theory is one to be worried about.
I mean, it's New Zealand and France out of that group. That's quite easy, isn't it?
Well, the other interesting thing is this is probably very different for any New Zealand team to go into World Cup, having been humbled by the largest ever score against South Africa recently. So, they are still a very, very good team. And I'm fascinated to see how they go. I mean, let's not forget South Africa lost their first game in Japan to New Zealand quite comfortably in the end. They were well beaten. And they
Didn't you guys lose your first game as well when you won the World Cup?
No.
Am I making that up?
We beat
South Africa are the first team ever in history to have lost a game and then go on and win it. So it is possible, but make no mistake, whoever loses that game, be France or New Zealand, will be then walking a tightrope. And I don't know, I mean, there's part of me that wants France to win that game because it just, if you're the host nation, it just gets the whole tournament off to a.
It's the best start.
It's the best start for them. If they don't,
but it's the worst start for everyone else, isn't it? Oh my God, that was.
Well, I don't know. If you get New Zealand on a roll, it's not great for everyone else either.
This is true.
But at least we'll all be having fun in the French if they win. We'll be all having fun in France.
That's
not
very
that
true.
We'll struggle to have fun in France.
There's going to be nerves as well for every team when you play your first game. We were against Georgia in 03. You're nervous. I mean, they're not mocks anymore. It's the real thing, and you've got to get them right.
So that pool is pretty straightforward then. Pool B, South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, Tonga, Romania. Mike, everyone is talking about South Africa and Ireland. You've mentioned Scotland already. They're just kind of quietly going about their business.
They are the perfect team to ruin someone else's World Cup. So, and then you look at the permutations of if they nick one against South Africa or Ireland, then it shifts the pressure. If they nick South Africa, suddenly South Africa's how much the pressure shifts to how important that Ireland game is. You can then let the pressure get to you and
I think that look, Scotland have produced some steady results. I mean, they've beaten England consistently. They've always struggled a little bit against Ireland, but if you look at the makeup of their squad, they've got big, strong, fit forwards, and with Finn Russell, anything can happen. So they're a very dangerous side to play against. I think there's been enough in their warm-up games to suggest that they could cause an upset.
And if you look at those two France games, they played really well in that.
How are we feeling about Ireland? Because there's a team that are the number one side in the world. They've beaten everyone, Grand Slam champions.
I'm feeling confident.
Well, I agree because listen, I mean, Mike and I played in 03, and we went into that tournament as the Grand Slam champions, as the number one side in the world, exactly the same position Ireland are in. We felt quite comfortable with that, but actually once we arrived in Australia, the pressure did start to just creep up on you, because when you are the number one side, there is a different press conference. There's a different expectation. Everyone plays their best game against you, but they seem to handle it quite well. You know, Johnny Sexton's back in there. They haven't sustained too many injuries. It's interesting. I don't think they've played as well as they can in their warm-up games, but that's okay, because that means there's a little bit more room for improvement there. And I think they're saving a little bit for the tournament, which is a good thing.
I think they've played around with their squad a fair bit. The key thing for me, if you look at their forward packs, you need a forward pack that's going to go all the way through the tournament. And in the past, we've maybe talked about strength in depth, but you look at they've got 6 props. 4 of those you'd pick week in, week out.
Just Healy was a bit of a blow.
Yeah, Healy is a blow, but they've still got 4 qualities in Porter, Kilcoyne, Furlong and Beelum. They've still got great props within that. Then the second rows, every single one of them you take out the 4, you wouldn't mind starting. And then their back row is their back row.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So to go deep into a tournament, you're going to have a forward pack that can stand up, especially with the games that they're going to have to play. Not only have you got Scotland and South Africa to take on, then you're going to go against France or New Zealand. Yeah. And then you'll get whatever you get from the other side as you come through. But that's the biggest thing for that side of the draw, is they got to keep people fresh. And you look at the balance of how Ireland play now. They still do what they did under Joe Smith, protect their own end unbelievably well. They still compete for those balls, but then they've now been given that freedom to actually have a look, have a different kicking policy as well on the edge a little bit more. And it's really working out for them.
What is the mood? I was going to say, what is the mood in the camp? You can give us the inside line,
I don't know, Steve, I'm not
you?
in there, unfortunately.
Well, you're not speaking to your husband.
Yeah.
You don't speak about rugby. I think it's a happy camp. So I don't know, it's that thing, isn't it? When they get over, you know that all the questions are going to be like, oh, well, you've never got past the quarterfinals. And that's the interesting thing.
And it's funny, I mean, Lols has very rarely sat in that conversation, but being at Gloucester and always getting to finals and always losing finals, that question never goes.
How much does that affect you?
It just brings a massive irritation. I don't think you really look back at it, and obviously you play the media answer going, look, it's always going to be there until you change it. I never changed it at Gloucester. We won the Parker Pen or whatever it was back in the day, but we never went to that next step, and it's just stuck with you, and they're going to have to deal with that.
They do seem to be in a very different place now, don't they? Different group of players.
They're also very comfortable. They've got a lot of players from Leinster who have, serial winners. So it's not like they're not used to that. They've got world-class players as well. The interesting thing for me will be, how does Andy Farrell juggle his squad around to make sure that some of his best players, James Ryan, Tadhg Furlong, Johnny Sexton, are still on the field at the end of the game. Yeah. Because what we learned from the European Cup final was that if you take some of your best players off the field and the game's not won, you can end up by losing it. And I think to go deep in the tournament, they're going to need those better players still on the field. Can they do the 80 minutes consistently against some of those players? I think they can, but it's going to be an interesting balancing act for the coaches. For 2 of those games in their group, you are going to have to pick your best team. Yeah. South Africa and Scotland, I don't think you can rotate going into that. Yeah. So then it's what damage that does. And then you're going to go into, got a couple of the games that you expect to win. But
it's
then
a brutal side of the draw.
I was going to say, you can't take Tonga lightly either, can you?
Well, no. But you can wrap people in cotton wool. Get out there.
Okay, so what are we saying out of that group then, despite you fancying Scotland's chances? Are you still saying South Africa, Ireland? Or
I still think they'll get through, but I think it could go down to points difference. I think it could be a upset in there.
Right, Pool C. Wales, Australia, Fiji, Georgia, Portugal. Steve, I feel like this was pretty open. Worries me a little bit. How do you see this one playing
It's
out?
mad, isn't it? I think you look at Australia and they could either get all the way to the final or get knocked out in the pool stages.
Either way, though, the press conference is going to be great. So actually, I'm quite comfortable with that.
Well, they can't get any worse. If you have a press conference with Eddie Jones when you're there, you can say, well, Eddie, you've already had the worst press conference and this is now for the best.
It was such a good watch. I think comfortable watch.
Eddie with a chip on his shoulder. And with a cause to fight, you do fear that, Australia eventually, they have to come right eventually. I mean, they've lost 5 in a row. So you would think that they will get it together.
Do you not think there was enough? I mean, the one Bledisloe Cup match they played where they came out the blocks quite quickly, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, 21-0 up or whatever.
21-0 up. I mean, there's enough in that performance to suggest that somewhere in there is a very, very good side. If they do get it right, and let's just say that they will, because Eddie Jones's record, you have to respect that. Whether you like him or not, at World Cup time, he's always managed to get a squad together that delivers. So
there are some very good players in that team, and they have put in performances. There was even good stuff in the hammering from France, and they're creating stuff, but they're not finishing stuff off. But they have good players. That
he's
winger, I
backed a
can't
lot.
say his name now. So it goes on for it. I can't say it, but
Yeah.
I'm not even going to attempt it right now.
None of us
'cause I
are. We're
haven't
just
got-
looking at you, just
I'm not
expecting
gonna-
you to.
I haven't got it written in front of me, but
What's the mood in Wales about Wales's chances? Because
Say
obviously-
Wales for me again, like you did
Wales.
then. Okay.
Because they're having a bit of a rebuild. They've obviously had a rebuild under Gatland. They've had to, they took a long time to move on from some real legends of the game.
Yeah.
And there's some green shoots of recovery there. There's definitely
There are green shoots of recovery, but I don't think people are very optimistic, like especially after seeing Fiji against England, and we don't really know what to expect from Australia, and then we lost to Georgia as well recently. So,
Yeah.
but I think Gatland better than anyone, right? And he always manages to get something from those boys at World Cup stages. I don't know how he does it, but so I think there isn't a huge amount of optimism. But we're like, okay, well, let's just get out of the group and then see what can happen.
Well, that might be a good thing.
Yeah,
Having
yeah.
no optimism.
get out the group is optimistic.
Yeah. All right.
Says
there is
us as
one.
I
Englishmen.
think with their
Yeah.
best available 15 and squad, I think if they manage to, they picked up a few injuries in the warm-ups, but if they can stay injury-free, their best team has still got packed full of some experienced players as well. Falatau's and Dan Biggers playing his last World
Have you
Cup.
ever played in a team with co-captains? Does that work?
Do you know
Does it
what?
matter?
They're both such good guys. Like, I think he's played a blinder there. Jack Morgan is such a good bloke, and Derry Lakers as well. They're just like, I know they're young, but I think that's quite a clever move. Like,
Yeah.
so
So
what
they
do you
don't
think
sp-
about?
Yeah, but
co-captains?
there's not really an emotive captain driver there, though, is there? But I don't know who
They
that
probably,
leads
do, they
on.
probably do 5 minutes each just before you run out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you take the first 5 minutes of the team tour and I'll do the next 5.
Actually, I was going to ask you, what would your team talk be to England right now? I meant to ask you that at the top, and I forgot.
Well, it'd have nothing to do with rugby, would it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of history between England and Argentina. Margaret Thatcher didn't help anyone with that, to be honest.
Oh my God.
Well, no, it's a fact. It is a fact, and I'm not sure how much of the current generation necessarily, studied history at school, but there's a reason why every game we played against Argentina was a very tough game of rugby and they've got so much better. In fact, this is a team, Argentina, that have beaten England already in the last 12 months. So
and are built for. They're always built for rugby. World
I don't
Cup.
think
Yeah,
I don't think
always.
this group of England players need any more motivation because they lost to Argentina at Twickenham the last outing. So,
But no one's talking about them either, though. Like, it's a bit like Scotland. No one's talking about Argentina.
Again, I think they've gone through a little plateau. You watched them in the Rugby Championship this time. Obviously, they got the win over Australia, the last play of the game. They got a bit of a serve in by South Africa, but they didn't have a lot of their players because the French league goes for so long. They were missing a lot of players. So it's just how they've adapted over that short time for those players to come into squad. But yeah, when they're on song, they're great to watch.
You deflected nicely there from getting away from Wales not getting out
Yeah,
of the group.
that's quite good.
That was clever, that wasn't
getting
it?
out of the group, so
Yes,
Oh.
we are.
At whose expense?
Like, genuinely, I don't like Australia, is it? I'm going to go Fiji, Wales. Is that
Fiji
a
and
bold call?
Wales.
Well, not really. I mean, Fiji are the top ranked team.
Yeah.
Mate, Georgia could throw some spanner into someone's hat. You know what I mean?
I think in light of the way that Fiji have played, and there was enough in that France and England game to suggest that they're clearly very dangerous. But equally, if you're a world-class coach, which both Wales and Australia have one, there is a way of constructing a game plan that frustrates the Fijians and, making zero mistakes, turning the ball over at every opportunity and giving them an opportunity to play is not how you play against them, So I think that let's give Gatland and Eddie Jones credit. If you go into that Fiji game and you're trying to play 7-a-side rugby, you're going to have a difficult time. But I'm pretty sure they'll come up with a game plan that is more like old school test rugby that makes sure that they win that game.
The worry is for everyone in that group is Fiji's scrum looked rock solid, and the 10, their exit plan was really good. And no matter how much you try and stifle the ball, at some point one of them will get one opportunity and they'll make someone look like an idiot, and they flood the channels so well, and it's like bang bang bang, try.
So we're still saying Wales and Australia though, aren't we? I am.
You're still saying Wales and
I'm
Australia.
saying Wales and
I think that
Australia
first
as well.
game is going to be huge, though. Wales, Fiji. I think if Wales lose that game,
I think Fiji get through, but I'm not sure who at the expense of.
okay.
Just because you're here, I think Australia will go through.
Okay.
So as an aside, how about Lewis Rees-Zammit as the top try scorer in the competition? There's an outside bet for you. If Wales
he's got a
get
doc
through.
coming out next week. on his career so far?
No, he was on fine form at the Monaco Grand Prix.
Was he actually?
Just as a side note, Monaco Grand Prix.
That's brilliant.
He was on very good form.
I think, do you know what I like about Lewis, though? He just embraces it all. It's like what he does is great, but he's like one of this new generation, isn't he? He knows his value. He knows his worth. He's going to enjoy it. And like,
I thought all wingers were like that. They just get on with
I
it.
don't know. Anyway, we've kind of spoken a bit about Pool D, haven't we, really?
Yeah.
Like England's pool, Argentina, Japan, Chile, Samoa. I know like England rugby is not in a fantastic place at the moment, but they're going to get out of that pool, aren't they?
Well, here's a question for you, Lol. If England don't get out of that pool, does Steve Borthwick lose his job?
I would say you can't sack him. You can't give him the hand grenade you've given him, and then throw him
Sack
out.
him off,
Sack him off straight out of the bat.
Yeah.
Even Eddie's come out to defend him and blame the RFU. Throw smoke somewhere else. It wasn't me. It was
or alternatively,
what do you mean it wasn't you? We played the best rugby ever in 2019, and then it went downhill. How have those players suddenly become?
I mean, it's just the enormity of that game can't be underestimated for England. I mean, if they win, all of the disruption, all of the results, everything in the build-up just goes away immediately, and it is a serious momentum shift. And suddenly you beat Argentina, the England squad are feeling happy with life. Japan's second game, they got their, potentially their two hardest games in the first two games, and wouldn't take Samoa lightly, but you can mix and match your squad a little bit and move forward in a way that's quite constructive towards a quarter-final. But lose that game and then, they appear to have a bit of a siege mentality at the moment, which is slightly concerning for me.
Is that concerning though, or can that be a good thing?
Well, it can work, but it's not the way to operate a world-class team.
No.
You feel at the moment the RFU, they've just battened down every hatch. You can't get in. It's an impenetrable place.
Is that like a defence mechanism, or is it always?
Yeah, they think that's better. That's
Yeah.
the worst thing you should do. You should be actually getting. You need to be out there making people believe, and that's by putting players in front of fans and going right, hearing what the boys have to say, rather than getting the odd tweet that's out there. For example, Ellis going, "Write us off if you want." You don't want that. You want that face to face.
It's also okay to be vulnerable. We've all lost big games of rugby that we should have won. Maybe you go out there, you explain yourself. The fans see there's a little bit of vulnerability there. There's a bit of passion because the players care. The players have spirit. They have passion. There's no one that's trying harder to get things right than them. The problem is if you don't, there is a void that's left,
and
that void is filled with people who don't say very nice things about England.
Yeah.
Were you allowed to do when you guys played and you had a bad performance like that? Was that within the group then would say, right, boys, one of us needs to front up now and go and talk about this? Or were you even allowed to do that? Would the RFU be like, well, no, we don't?
It was funny because we were probably shut down a little bit because Clive had, he had this pet peeve at the media and everything, and we debugged every room and everything like that. But fortunately,
debugged every room.
Yeah, we had microphone sweepers and everything.
I love that so much.
Still lost every line out in the final.
But I think, we were fortunate that we didn't lose that many games. But when we lost Scotland in 2000, whether the foot and mouth game, we lost 3 Grand Slams along that way, and we, you have to sort of front up at a certain.
But that's what I mean now. I mean, within that group, you would look at the senior players and think, right, well, one of you needs to take ownership of this.
There's enough in there.
Yeah.
I heard, you got George Ford coming out saying, look, training wasn't good enough the week of the Fiji game. But why can't everyone can be comfortable saying that? You can actually be more down on yourself to say that, look, this is what we're trying to do, to actually try and get some sympathy back or something, or flip it around in a different way. Actually, going through that Fiji game, as much in attack, I saw more positives than I'd seen for a long time in terms of the way they managed to put some air on the ball. Johnny May giving him a one-on-one, getting a try. Manu and actually Ollie Lawrence got a few balance in the first half. In the second half, it seemed to go really conservative again, and that was a bit of a worry for me. But they need to trust themselves.
You cut out the simple, basic, unforced errors. I don't know whether players were nervous, they're just snatching at things, but I mean, they had just so many mistakes. And then what happens is, as a player, you start to try and make up for that, and then you end up giving penalties away. So those two things added together end up with a really disastrous balance sheet, and then you invite the team into the game. I'm pretty sure, and I've mentioned this in the column I wrote over the weekend, all of those problems can be sorted out quite quickly overnight. You go into a game, error-free rugby. I mean, they're not going to suddenly set the world on fire and score like loads and loads of tries, but error-free rugby, okay, and just, do the discipline thing right, and then suddenly there's some very, very good players in that squad, some very experienced players. Some of these guys are going to their 4th World Cup, so please don't tell me they haven't got what it takes to go out there and answer some of their critics.
Well, so can they make the semi-final?
I think they can.
Yeah, they can, but it's not respectful to suggest that they should or will at this stage of the tournament, given what they've done coming into it. Just win your first game. As a very neat segue, on that note, it seems like quite a good time for us to cross over to the Evening Standard rugby correspondent, Nick Purewal, who is based in Le Touquet over in France.
Beautifully said.
And he has, shall I say it in the word? Le Touquet.
Just
Bordeaux.
Just don't say Touquet. Yeah.
Le Touquet, that's long gone for me. And he has the latest news from the England camp.
Well, England have been in France since Thursday, but today was the first day that you felt that Steve Borthwick and the coaches and the players are beginning to warm to their surroundings. Le Touquet is one of the most pristine, prestigious resorts in France. It's the most English of resorts, and it's actually where Ian Fleming came up with the idea for James Bond, if you could believe that. The good news on Monday was that it looks like all of England's players should be fit for the weekend. So that means Tom Curry would be available potentially for the first time to feature, having missed the whole August programme with an ankle problem. That would be a massive boost if he could return, although it would probably be a big stretch for him to start. Elliot Daly and George Martin are also in training, and Courtney Lawes trained, having missed the capping ceremony on Saturday. So that was the official ceremony where England were introduced to the people of Le Touquet at the Palais de Congrès, which is the convention centre. England's approach to their welcome ceremony was fairly staid in comparison to some of the more heartfelt, comfortable offerings we've seen from the likes of Wales, where Dan Biggar delivered a very polished speech in French with pretty much no notes. And if you look at Fiji, their players delivered a very melodic song, came across very humble and very warm. Ireland had an open training session in front of 12,000 people in Tours, which is where their base is. England did have an open session on Friday, but it was ticketed and there were about 500 people perhaps there. But with Borthwick and his coaches, they've appeared a bit tetchy at times. Richard Wigglesworth was disagreeing with journalists the other day at the suggestion there'd been some kind of disconnect between coaches and players, and that the players weren't completely happy with the game plan. And Borthwick appeared pretty miffed with the setup on Friday in terms of where the press and the broadcasters were stood for the open training session. These are sorts of things that you wouldn't expect these coaches to be bothering themselves at this point, to be frank, because they've got bigger fish to fry. On Friday, all eyes will be on Paris because France take on the All Blacks. England will be hoping they can sort of sneak under the radar a little. But this Argentina game is absolutely massive because with Michael Cheika, who's a very, very smart, astute coach, who's always got some tricks up his sleeve, who's a very canny guy, somebody who's well respected all around the world. And he's a great fit for that Argentina team, which is a team full of fiery, committed, pugnacious rugby players. It's going to heat up very nicely for an absolutely brilliant game on Saturday. But England have got a long way to go. One school of thought says they've been holding some tricks up their sleeve. Another says that they just aren't capable of delivering what's required. We'll find out on Saturday night.
Okay then, guys, before we go, I'm going to get you all to make predictions of who you think will be lifting the trophy on the 28th of October. And one country, not like, oh, well, this could happen, this could happen, and then...
You can't say and
or. No, one of that. One word answer. Okay, Lol, do you want to go first?
France, I think. I really do hope so. Well, it's my hope. I said South Africa last World Cup, and then I was crying in my pint after the first game, and it could well be the same again, because France may not win that first game, but I think given all the problems that they've had coming into this competition, I think that squad is incredibly well prepared, incredibly well motivated. And they've got, in Antoine Dupont, the best rugby player on the planet.
Okay, that was more than one word, but fine, we'll give it to you. Mike, who do you think?
Because I was going to pick France, but I'll go a different way because that's not and or.
Go on, go Ireland, go Ireland.
So, go on then, I will. Ireland.
Good lad.
Okay, good.
Ooh.
I'm going to agree.
Oh, well, I was going to go
Steve.
France as well, but now I'm going to have to pick somebody else. I actually think it'll be a France-South Africa final, and I think then it's very close to call, so I'll go South Africa.
Okay, so we've covered a few bases
It's definitely be those three. You pick the other one, and then it's definitely one of us is definitely winning.
Is no one worried that no one is mentioning New Zealand? The fact that Joe Schmidt is now part of their coaching team and is quite an interesting coach. And I mean, have they fallen that badly that they don't even come into contention? Because a dangerous New Zealand side is.
I think it was that performance at Twickenham, wasn't it? It sort of. I know it was South Africa. And I know they were down to 14 men, but for me, it just looked like that's not a team that's going to win the World Cup.
But you sort of forget they humped them in the Rugby World Championship 3 weeks earlier.
True.
Weeks before. Well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting and exciting. We've seen a pretty unsettled domestic landscape over the last 12 months, but it's really a chance, I guess, to showcase why we all love the game and hopefully attract new fans to the sport too.
Yeah, and listen, let's not forget this is the biggest tournament on the planet for rugby. It's the best players playing on the biggest stage of all in the best stadiums, and I do believe that France will serve up something very, very special. There'll be thousands and thousands of fans, not just the Irish, thousands of fans invading France and making it an incredible few weeks.
Are you worried it's all about red, yellow cards might start spoiling it as a spectacle?
Hope not. I think we're going to see a lot of bunkers. I think we're going to be a bit like my golf, really. We're going to see a lot of bunkers because I genuinely believe that when there's a 50-50 decision, if you've got a bunker opportunity, why would the referee, like Owen Farrell was a red card, no doubt. The referee, if before the bunker concept was introduced, that would have just been a straight red. Yeah. But now every referee will just defer. So I think it's going to be a different World Cup. We've got to get used to that. We're going to be broadcasting it. And we're just going to have to explain to people that, that yellow might become a red, which is a new concept.
But it protects the referees out there, which I think is a fantastic thing. And, hopefully you won't see a Joubert running off the pitch after at the end of the game or anything because they're worried.
And you just have to make sure you've got your sea legs. Well, does the cruise ship actually move when you're on it?
It doesn't move till Monday. Friday to Monday, say. Then it goes from Marseille to Ibiza. What could go wrong?
Marseille to Ibiza.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Well, with
Haskell DJing, I'm sure.
Does his USB stick last that long?
Not entirely
Listen,
sure.
That's all for this episode, and what an absolute cracker it's been. We shall be back next week with plenty to talk about. But for now, my thanks to Sarra, to Steve, and of course to Mike Tindall. And thanks to you all for listening.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.